The young princess was ignored by all alien suitors until a human came forward. Princess Zerdil stood alone on the crystal balcony of the Grand Palace, watching the stars dance above the capital city of Nexus Prime. Below her, thousands of lights twinkled like earthbound stars, each one representing a different species that had traveled here for the Convergence Summit. This gathering happened only once every 10 years, bringing together the most important families from across the galaxy. Tonight was special for another reason. Tonight was the night when Princess Zerdil would meet potential suitors from the greatest noble houses in known space. Her father, Emperor Kethmer, had arranged this gathering hoping to find her a suitable partner. At 25 years old, she was considered ready for marriage by the standards of her people, the Veltari. But Princess Zerdil had a secret that made her different from every other member of her species. She was telepathically silent. For the Veltari and most other advanced species in the Coalition, telepathic communication was as natural as breathing. They could share thoughts, emotions, and memories directly from mind to mind. It was how they showed love, conducted business, and built relationships. Their entire society was built around this mental connection. Zerdil possessed none of these abilities. She could not send thoughts to others, nor could she receive them. In a world where minds touched constantly, she lived in complete mental silence. Her family called it a genetic anomaly. The medical experts called it psychic nullification syndrome. Most people simply called it a curse. The princess smoothed her silver gown and checked her reflection in the polished surface of the balcony railing. Her pale blue skin shimmered under the soft lights, and her dark hair was arranged in the traditional style of her people. She looked perfect on the outside, but she knew that her beauty meant nothing if she could not share minds with a potential partner. A soft chime echoed through the palace, signaling that the formal presentations would begin soon. Zerdil took a deep breath and walked back inside to the Great Hall, where hundreds of beings from dozens of different worlds had gathered. The hall was magnificent. Floating crystals provided gentle light, and the walls displayed moving pictures of famous moments in Coalition history. Representatives from the Zephyrian bird people preened their colorful feathers, while talking in their musical language. The rock-like granite lords stood in small groups, their stone faces serious as always. Energy beings from the Stellar Collective flickered in and out of visible light as they communicated through pure thought. Everyone here could share minds in some way, everyone except Zerdil. Princess Zerdil of House Veltari, announced the herald in a voice that carried across the vast hall. Daughter of Emperor Kethmer, scholar of ancient history, and heir to the Crystal Throne. All eyes turned toward her as she walked down the grand staircase. The princess held her head high, trying to project confidence she did not feel. She had practiced this moment many times, but now that it was happening, her heart beat fast with worry. The first suitor approached almost immediately. Prince Zandril of the Crimson Nebula Empire was tall and handsome, with skin that changed colors like a sunset. He bowed politely and extended his hand toward her forehead in the traditional greeting of mental contact. "Princess," he said with a warm smile, "I'm honored to meet you. May I share the thoughts of my heart?" Zerdil placed her hand gently on his, knowing what would happen next. Prince Zandril's expression changed from warm interest to confusion, then to disappointment. He tried again, pressing his fingers more firmly against her temples. Nothing happened. No thoughts flowed between them. No emotional connection sparked to life. I apologize, Princess," he said, stepping back quickly. "I believe there has been some mistake. Perhaps we can try again later." But Zerdil knew he would not return. She had seen that look too many times before. The pattern repeated itself throughout the evening. Lord Thekman of the Crystal Worlds approached with grand gestures, expecting to dazzle her with his mental powers. When he realized she could not receive his telepathic poetry, he mumbled an excuse and disappeared into the crowd. Prince Velimar from the Golden Systems tried 3 times to establish a mental link before giving up with visible frustration. By the middle of the evening, word had spread quietly through the gathering. The princess was broken. She could not mind speak. One by one, the remaining suitors found reasons to avoid her. Some pretended to be busy with other conversations. Others simply stared at her from across the room with pity in their eyes. Zerdiel found herself standing alone near a tall window, watching the party continue around her. She was used to being ignored, but tonight it hurt more than usual. This was supposed to be her chance to find someone who could understand her, someone who could see past her limitation. Instead, she felt more alone than ever. From across the room, she noticed someone watching her. He was different from the other guests. His skin was a warm brown color instead of the blues, greens, and purples of most coalition species. His hair was dark and cut short in a style she had never seen before. Most importantly, he was not trying to probe her mind or send her telepathic messages. He was simply looking at her with what appeared to be genuine curiosity. The stranger wore the formal robes of a coalition ambassador, but the design was unfamiliar. On his chest was a small badge she had never seen before, a simple blue circle with white markings. That looked like a planet dot as their eyes met across the crowded hall. The stranger did something unexpected. He smiled at her, not the polite, diplomatic smile she was used to receiving, but a real, warm expression that reached his eyes. Then he began walking toward her, moving through the crowd with quiet confidence. Princess Zerdiel felt her heart beat faster again, but this time it was not from worry. For the first time all evening, someone was approaching her who did not look disappointed or confused. Someone was coming to meet her who did not seem to care about her mental silence. She straightened her shoulders and prepared to meet this mysterious stranger, wondering if tonight might turn out differently than she had expected. The stranger reached Princess Zerdiel just as she was beginning to wonder if she should leave the gathering early. Up close, she could see that he was indeed very different from the other ambassadors. His features were softer than most coalition species, and his movements seemed more relaxed and natural. "Your Highness," he said, offering a simple bow instead of reaching for her forehead. "I am Ambassador Marcus Reed of the Terran Federation. I believe this is the first time our peoples have met." Formally, Zerdiel blinked in surprise. "Terran Federation? I'm not familiar with your world, Ambassador Reed. Please, call me Marcus," he said with that same warm smile. "And that makes sense. We only joined the coalition 6 months ago. We are quite new to galactic politics." The princess found herself relaxing slightly. There was something different about the way this human spoke to her. His voice was calm and friendly, without the formal stiffness she was used to hearing from other diplomats. More importantly, he was not trying to touch her mind or look disappointed about her silence. "Marcus," she repeated, testing the unfamiliar name. "That is an interesting sound. What does it mean in your language?" "It is an old name from our history," Marcus explained. "It means warlike or strong, though I have always preferred to think of it as meaning determined." Zerdiel tilted her head curiously. "You speak of meaning as if names carry stories. Among my people, names are shared through mind touch when we are born. The meaning comes directly into our thoughts." "How fascinating," Marcus said, and he sounded like he genuinely meant it. "For humans, we often choose names based on family history or simply because we like how they sound. Then we grow into them, making them our own through our actions." This was the longest conversation Zerdiel had ever had with someone outside her immediate family. Usually, after a few spoken words, other beings would try to establish mental contact. When that failed, the conversation would end quickly. But Marcus seemed perfectly content to keep talking with his voice. "May I ask you something, Marcus?" she said carefully. "Of course. Why are you not trying to—" She paused, searching for the right words. "Why are you not trying to touch my thoughts?" Marcus looked puzzled for a moment, then understanding crossed his features. "Ah, I see. You are referring to telepathic communication. I am afraid humans do not possess that ability. We communicate only through speech, writing, and body language." Zerdiel stared at him in amazement. "You have no mental connection abilities at all." "None whatsoever," Marcus confirmed cheerfully. "When we first joined the coalition, it caused quite a stir. Most species could not understand how we had developed civilization without telepathy. They found it quite primitive. Primitive? Zeradil felt a flash of anger on his behalf. How can communication be primitive? You speak with such clarity and emotion in your voice. I can understand every word you say. Marcus's smile grew wider. Thank you, Princess. That means more to me than you might realize. It has been challenging, being the only non-telepathic species in most diplomatic meetings. But how do you share complex ideas? She asked, fascination replacing her earlier nervousness. How do you express deep emotions or share memories? We have developed many ways. Marcus explained, gesturing with his hands as he spoke. We tell stories, we create art, we write books and compose music, we paint pictures and build monuments. Every human achievement you see came from people talking to each other, sharing ideas through words and showing each other what they had learned. Princess Zeradil had never heard anyone describe communication this way before. Among her people, telepathy was considered the highest form of interaction. The idea that a species could build great civilizations using only spoken words seemed incredible. Could you tell me one of these stories? She asked hesitantly. Marcus looked around the great hall, where other guests were engaged in their telepathic conversations, their faces blank as their minds touched. Would you like to walk in the garden? It might be quieter there. They made their way out to the palace gardens, where flowering plants from a dozen worlds created a rainbow of colors under the moonlight. The sounds of the party faded behind them, replaced by the gentle music of night insects. What kind of story would you like to hear? Marcus asked as they walked along a path lined with glowing flowers. Something from your world. Zeradil said immediately, something that shows how humans share important ideas. Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he began to speak in a voice that was somehow both conversational and storytelling. Long ago on Earth, there was a young woman named Marie who was fascinated by invisible forces in nature. Other scientists told her that her ideas were wrong, that women could not understand such complex things. But Marie did not give up. She worked in a cold, dark laboratory, handling dangerous materials, trying to understand the mysteries of the universe. As Marcus continued the story, Zeradil found herself completely absorbed. He told her about Marie Curie's discoveries, her struggles, and her eventual success. But more than that, he painted pictures with his words. She could imagine the laboratory, the glowing radium, the excitement of discovery. She won not one but two awards for her work. Marcus concluded, and her daughter also became a famous scientist. Marie showed that determination and curiosity could overcome any obstacle. That is wonderful, Zeradil breathed. I can see it all in my mind, as if I was there watching it happen. Is this how all humans share knowledge? Stories are one way, Marcus nodded. We also have books full of knowledge, and schools where teachers explain ideas to students. We have debates where people with different opinions discuss problems until they find solutions. Princess Zeradil stopped walking and turned to face him. Marcus, may I tell you something that I have never told anyone else? I would be honored to listen. I have always loved the old stories of our coalition's history. The tales of how different species first met, how they overcame their differences to work together. But no one has ever wanted to hear me tell these stories because I cannot share them mind to mind. They say spoken stories are too slow, too limited. Marcus's expression grew serious. Princess, I believe they are wrong. Some of the most important human discoveries came from people sitting together and talking about ideas, sharing thoughts. Through words, there's magic in spoken stories that telepathy might not be able to capture. For the first time in her life, Princess Zeradil felt understood. Over the next 3 days of the Convergence Summit, Princess Zeradil and Ambassador Marcus Reed spent every available moment together. What had started as a single conversation in the garden had grown into something neither of them had expected. A true friendship built on shared words and mutual respect. Each morning, they would meet in the palace library, a vast hall filled with knowledge crystals and data cores from across the galaxy, while other delegates attended telepathic briefings and mind meld sessions. Marcus and Zeradil sat among the ancient records, talking about history, culture, and ideas. Tell me about the Kethler Accords, Marcus said on the third morning, settling into his usual chair across from her. He had quickly learned that the princess possessed an incredible knowledge of coalition history. Zerdiel's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. Most beings think the Accords were simply a trade agreement between the inner worlds and the rim territories. But the real story is much more interesting. She pulled out a historical data crystal and placed it in the reader. But instead of downloading the information directly into Marcus's mind as would be normal, she began to explain it with words. The Kethler were a species that communicated through color changes in their skin, she said, her voice growing animated. When they first encountered the telepathic species, neither side could understand the other. The telepaths tried to force mental contact, which actually caused the Kethler physical pain. Marcus leaned forward, fascinated. What happened then? For 50 years, there was mistrust and fear between them. But then a young Kethler artist named Valana learned to speak the common tongue. She spent months creating a translation system that could turn telepathic thoughts into color patterns and color patterns into spoken words. That's incredible, Marcus said. One person bridged the gap between two completely different forms of communication. Exactly, Zerdiel said, her excitement evident. And once they could communicate properly, they realized they had so much to offer each other. The Kethler had developed amazing art and music, while the telepaths had advanced sciences together. They created technologies and cultural works that neither could have achieved alone. Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking about her words. Princess, this story. It sounds familiar to what we are doing right now. What do you mean? You and I come from very different communication backgrounds, but by talking together like this, we are sharing knowledge in ways that neither of our peoples typically use. You are explaining history in a way that makes it come alive. And I am learning things about the coalition that no telepathic briefing could have taught me. Princess Zerdiel paused, considering his words. I never thought about it that way. But you are right, in all my years of study, no one has ever asked me to explain these stories with words. They always wanted the information transferred directly to their minds, and in doing that, they missed the most important part, Marcus said gently. They got the facts, but they missed your understanding, your insights, your way of seeing the connections between events as they talked. Neither of them noticed that they were no longer alone. In the library, several other delegates had begun to drift in, ostensibly to research their own projects, but actually to listen to their conversations. Word had spread through the diplomatic community about the unusual partnership between the human ambassador and the silent princess. Lord Vextar of the Mindweavers Collective was the first to approach them directly. His species were among the most powerful telepaths in the galaxy, and he was known for his arrogance. Princess Zerdiel, he said in a voice that dripped with false politeness, I could not help but overhear your discussion of the Kethler Accords. I find it interesting that you choose to share this knowledge through such primitive means. Marcus felt the princess tense beside him, but before he could respond, she spoke with quiet dignity. Lord Vextar, I'm curious. What do you know about the cultural exchange programs that followed the Accords? The telepath paused, clearly accessing his mental databases. There were standard trade agreements and population exchanges. Nothing of particular significance, actually, Zerdiel said, standing up. The cultural exchanges led to the development of 17 new forms of art, the creation of the Universal Translation Matrix, and the establishment of the first multi-species universities. These programs became the foundation for how different species learned to work together in the modern coalition. Lord Vextar looked uncomfortable. His telepathic knowledge download had given him the basic facts, but he had completely missed the deeper significance that Zerdiel understood. Furthermore, the princess continued, these same principles could be applied today to help integrate the many non-telepathic species that have been excluded from full coalition membership. A murmur went through the small crowd that had gathered. Marcus realized that this was the first time anyone had heard Zerdiel speak publicly about coalition policy. What are you suggesting, princess? Asked Ambassador Thelvana from the Crystal Spheres, her tone more curious than hostile. Zerdiel looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. She took a deep breath and spoke with growing confidence. I am suggesting that the coalition is missing opportunities by relying so heavily on telepathic communication. There are dozens of species that have applied for membership but been rejected because they cannot mind speak. Yet many of these species have developed incredible technologies, art forms, and philosophical systems that could benefit everyone. Impossible, scoffed Lord Vexstar. How could species advance without proper mental communication? Marcus stood up beside the princess. Lord Vexstar, my species had developed space travel, quantum physics, and interstellar communication networks. Before we ever knew telepathy existed, we did it all through spoken language, written records, and collaborative thinking. Perhaps, Zerdiel said quietly, the coalition would be stronger if it included more diverse forms of communication and thinking, rather than excluding those who are different. The gathered delegates exchanged glances. Some looked intrigued by her words, but others appeared deeply uncomfortable. The traditional telepathic families had built their power on the idea that mind speech was superior to all other forms of communication. As the crowd began to disperse, Marcus noticed several of the more conservative nobles having urgent telepathic conversations, their faces tense with worry. He realized that Zerdiel's simple suggestion had struck at the very foundation of how the coalition was organized. Princess, he said quietly, I think we may have just started something much bigger than either of us expected. Zerdiel smiled, but there was determination in her eyes. Good, it is time for change. The crisis began at dawn on the fourth day of the Convergence Summit. Princess Zerdiel woke to the sound of urgent alarms echoing through the palace corridors. She dressed quickly and rushed to the main communications center, where she found chaos. Dozens of diplomats were speaking in raised voices, while others stood motionless, their eyes closed in deep telepathic conferences. What is happening? She asked Captain Murdell of the Palace Guard. Trade routes, Your Highness. The captain replied grimly. The Rim territories and the core worlds are in a massive dispute. 3 major shipping lanes have been closed, and both sides are threatening to leave the coalition if they don't get their way. Zerdiel felt her heart sink. Trade disputes were among the most dangerous threats to galactic peace. When planets could not move goods and resources freely, shortages and economic collapse quickly followed. Wars had started over less. She spotted Marcus across the crowded room, standing near a large display screen that showed the contested trade routes. His face was serious as he studied the information. She made her way through the crowd to reach him. How bad is it? She asked quietly. Marcus looked up, his expression worried. Very bad. The Rim territories claim the core worlds are charging unfair taxes on their goods. The core worlds say the Rim planets are trying to ship dangerous materials without proper inspection. Both sides have evidence to support their claims. What are the other diplomats doing? The usual, Marcus said with a slight frown. The telepathic species are forming mind-link groups, trying to share thoughts and find a solution through mental consensus. But look at the results. He pointed to a section of the display showing the negotiation attempts every few minutes. New updates appeared. Telepathic Conference Group A, no agreement reached. Mindlink Session 7, talks suspended. Psychic mediation attempt failed. They are not making any progress, Zerdiel observed. Worse than that, Marcus said. I've been watching for 2 hours, and the situation is getting worse. Each time the telepathic groups fail to reach agreement, both sides become more angry and more suspicious. Emperor Kethmer appeared on a raised platform at the center of the room, his voice carrying over the noise. Attention, honored delegates. We have received word that both the Rim territories and the core worlds are preparing to withdraw their fleets from coalition protection. If we cannot resolve this crisis within the next 6 hours, we may lose 1/3 of our member worlds. A shocked silence fell over the room. Then the telepathic conferences resumed with even greater urgency. But still no solutions emerged. Princess Zerdiel watched the failed attempts with growing frustration. She knew from her historical studies that trade disputes like this had been resolved before, but not through the methods being used now. Marcus, she said suddenly, I need to ask you something important. In human history, how did your people resolve conflicts between groups who did not trust each other? Marcus thought for a moment. Usually through neutral mediators, people who could listen to both sides without taking sides. Themselves, the mediators would help each group understand what the other group really needed, then look for solutions that gave everyone something they wanted. Neutral mediators. Zerdil repeated, her mind racing. Marcus, I think I understand why the telepathic conferences are failing. What do you mean? When telepathic species form mind links, they can share thoughts perfectly within their own group, but they cannot truly understand species who think differently. The rim territories include many non-telepathic worlds, while the core worlds are mostly telepathic. Each side assumes the other thinks the way they do. Marcus's eyes widened as he grasped her meaning. So the telepathic mediators cannot really understand the non-telepathic concerns. And the non-telepathic worlds feel like their voices are not being heard. Exactly. But what if? Zerdil paused, her heart beating faster as an idea formed. What if we offered to mediate? You could help translate the human-style concerns of the non-telepathic worlds, and I could help explain the telepathic perspectives together. We might be able to bridge the gap. Marcus looked around the room at all the powerful diplomats and negotiators. Princess, do you think they would even listen to us? You are still considered, well, defective, she finished with a sad smile. And you are from a species that only joined the coalition 6 months ago. Yes, I know how it sounds, but it might work, Marcus said slowly. And at this point, what do they have to lose? Princess Zerdil straightened her shoulders and walked toward her father's platform. The crowd parted before her, and she could hear whispers following in her wake. When she reached the base of the platform, she called out in a clear voice, Father, I request permission to address the assembly. Emperor Kethmer looked down at his daughter with surprise. In all her years, Zerdil had never spoken publicly at a diplomatic gathering. Daughter, this is not the time for, please, Father. I believe I may have a solution. The emperor hesitated, then nodded. You may speak. Zerdil climbed the steps to the platform, very aware that hundreds of eyes were watching her. Marcus positioned himself near the front of the crowd, ready to support her if needed. Honored delegates. She began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. I have spent the last 3 days learning about human methods of communication and conflict resolution. I believe our current approach is failing because we are trying to solve a problem that requires multiple perspectives using only one type of thinking. Lord Vextar stepped forward, his expression scornful. Princess, with respect. This is not a matter for amateur theorists. This crisis requires the most advanced diplomatic minds in the galaxy, and yet those advanced minds have failed for 6 hours, Zerdil replied calmly. Lord Vextar, when did you last have a spoken conversation with a representative from the Rim Territories? The telepath paused, clearly uncomfortable. I do not see the relevance. The relevance is that half the worlds in dispute communicate, primarily through speech, writing, and cultural symbols. When you attempt to reach them through telepathy alone, you are speaking a language they cannot fully understand, and they cannot respond in a way you can fully comprehend. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several delegates began nodding thoughtfully. What do you propose? Asked Ambassador Thelvana. Princess Zerdil took a deep breath. I propose that Ambassador Reed and I serve as neutral mediators. We will speak directly with representatives from both sides. Using methods that each group can understand, we will find out what each side truly needs, not just what they are demanding. This is ridiculous, Lord Vextar protested. A human who has been in space for 6 months and a princess who cannot even mind speak are not qualified to handle galactic diplomacy. But Emperor Kethmer was studying his daughter with new interest. Zerdil, do you truly believe this approach could work? I do, Father. And if we fail, you can return to the traditional methods. But if we succeed, perhaps the coalition can learn new ways to bring different peoples together. The Emperor looked out at the assembled delegates. many of whom appeared intrigued by this unexpected proposal. Very well, you have 2 hours to attempt your mediation, but if you fail, the consequences will be severe. Princess Zerdil nodded, feeling both terrified and determined. Thank you, Father. We will not disappoint you. As she left the platform, Marcus met her at the bottom of the steps. Ready to make history? He asked with an encouraging smile. Ready to try, she replied. Now let us go talk to some very angry people. Princess Zerdil and Marcus Reed had exactly 2 hours to prevent the collapse of the coalition. They decided to split their approach. Marcus would meet with the Rim Territory representatives, while Zerdil spoke with the Core World delegates. Then they would come together to find a solution. Marcus found the Rim Territory group in a small conference room, away from the main diplomatic hall. The representatives looked tired and frustrated. Their leader, Captain Elena Vasquez from the mining world of Kepler Station, was a woman with withered hands and direct eyes. Captain Vasquez, Marcus said, introducing himself. I am Ambassador Reed from the Terran Federation. I wonder if I might ask you some questions about this trade situation. Another diplomat? Captain Vasquez sighed. Look, Ambassador, we have already explained our position to a dozen telepathic committees. They nod politely, then go back to their mind meetings and ignore everything we said. I understand your frustration, Marcus replied, but I am not telepathic, and I am not here to probe your thoughts. I just want to listen to what you have to say. With words, the captain studied him carefully. You are serious? You actually want to hear our side? Completely serious, please. Tell me what is really happening out there in the Rim Territories. Over the next 30 minutes, Marcus listened as Captain Vasquez and her colleagues explained their situation. The real problem was not about taxes or shipping fees. The issue was safety inspections that were taking so long that food shipments were spoiling before they reached their destinations. We have people going hungry on the outer worlds, Captain Vasquez said, her voice filled with emotion. The Core World inspectors insist on checking every single container with their telepathic scanning methods. But half our ships use non-telepathic crews who cannot interface with their equipment. So everything has to be unpacked and checked by hand, which takes days. And during those days, the food goes bad, Marcus said, understanding the real crisis exactly. We are not trying to smuggle anything dangerous. We just need a faster way to prove our shipments are safe. Meanwhile, in another part of the palace, Princess Zerdil sat with the Core World representatives. Their leader was Admiral Kexavon, a tall being with blue-gray skin, and the traditional telepathic implants of his species. Admiral Zerdil said politely, I know the Rim Territory representatives have made serious accusations about your inspection procedures. Could you help me understand your concerns? Admiral Kexavon looked surprised to be addressed directly in speech rather than through mental contact. Princess, the safety of all coalition worlds depends on proper cargo screening. We have prevented 17 smuggling attempts in the past year alone. That is very impressive work. Zerdil acknowledged. What kinds of dangerous materials have you discovered? Illegal weapons, toxic substances, and unlicensed technology, the Admiral replied. The telepathic scanning systems can detect these items instantly by reading the thoughts of the cargo handlers. But many Rim Territory ships use non-telepathic crews, so you cannot scan their thoughts to verify the cargo contents. Zerdil said thoughtfully. Precisely, this forces us to use manual inspection methods, which are much slower but equally thorough. We cannot compromise on safety, even if it causes delays. Zerdil could see that both sides had legitimate concerns. The Rim Territories needed faster deliveries to prevent food shortages, while the Core Worlds needed reliable security to protect everyone from dangerous cargo. With 20 minutes left before their deadline, Princess Zerdil and Marcus met in the garden where they had first talked for days earlier. Did you find the real problem? Marcus asked immediately. Yes, the Core Worlds are not trying to be difficult. Their security concerns are real and important, but their telepathic scanning methods do not work with non-telepathic crews. So everything has to be checked manually, which takes too long. and causes food to spoil, Marcus finished. Captain Vasquez told me the same story from the other side, Marcus. What if there was a way to do security scanning that worked for both telepathic and non-telepathic crews? Zerdiel's eyes lit up, like the universal translation matrix from the Kefler Accords. Marcus, I think I know exactly what we need to propose. They hurried back to the main hall, where the assembled delegates waited anxiously. Emperor Kethmer looked at his daughter with a mixture of hope and worry. Report, he said. Simply, Princess. Zerdiel stepped forward, her voice clear and confident. Honored delegates. The trade crisis is not really about taxes or fees. It is about two different security systems that cannot work together effectively, she explained. What she and Marcus had discovered, speaking to the entire assembly in words rather than telepathic broadcasting. As she talked, she noticed that the non-telepathic delegates were leaning forward with interest, while even the telepathic species seemed to be listening more carefully than usual. The solution, Marcus continued, is to develop hybrid inspection systems that combine telepathic scanning with technology that non-telepathic crews can operate. This would give everyone the security they need while maintaining the speed the Rim territories require. Admiral Kexavon stood up. Ambassador Reed, such a system would require months to develop and test. Actually, Princess Zerdiel said with a smile, it already exists 300 years ago. The Kefler faced the same problem when they tried to integrate their color-based communication with telepathic systems. They created interface technology that translates between different communication methods. She activated a holographic display showing historical records. The same principles could be adapted for cargo scanning. Telepathic scanners could read the cargo contents, then translate those readings into visual displays and audio signals that non-telepathic crews could understand and verify. The hall erupted in excited conversations as delegates realized the implications of her proposal. Furthermore, Marcus added, this technology could be used to integrate many other non-telepathic species into coalition systems. The Terran Federation would be honored to contribute our technological expertise to such a project. Captain Vasquez stood up from the Rim Territory section. If this system could guarantee the same level of security, while reducing inspection time to a few hours instead of several days, the Rim Territories would fully support it. Admiral Kexavon consulted quickly with his colleagues, then nodded. The core worlds agreed to support this proposal, provided the security standards remain uncompromised. Emperor Kethmer looked around the hall, seeing agreement on faces that had been filled with anger just hours before. It appears we have reached a solution. Princess Zerdiel, you will head the development of this new system, working directly with representatives from both sides. As the delegates began to disperse, talking excitedly about the new possibilities, Lord Vextar approached the princess. His expression was no longer scornful, but thoughtful. Princess, he said quietly, I owe you an apology. I had not considered that different forms of communication might reveal different aspects of a problem. Thank you, Lord Vextar. Zerdiel replied graciously. Perhaps we could work together on future projects. I believe combining telepathic insights with spoken discussion could lead to even better solutions. Marcus joined them, grinning widely. Princess, I think we have just changed how the coalition approaches problem-solving forever. Over the following weeks, Princess Zerdiel and Marcus worked together to establish the coalition's first department of cross-species communication. Their success with the trade crisis had proven that combining different communication methods could solve problems that had seemed impossible. The princess was no longer seen as defective or limited. Instead, she became the coalition's foremost expert on integrating telepathic and non-telepathic civilization. Species that had been waiting decades for membership were finally welcomed into the galactic commune. HFY Marcus accepted a permanent position as the first director of non-telepathic relations, working closely with Zerdiel to build bridges between different forms of consciousness and communication. On the one-year anniversary of their first meeting, they stood again in the palace garden, watching ships from dozens of newly integrated Worlds arrive at Nexus Prime. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not approached me that night? Zerdiel asked. Marcus smiled, the same warm expression that had first caught her attention. I think the galaxy would have missed out on something truly special. Your ideas and insights were always valuable, Princess. They just needed someone who could listen to them the right way. And your people's approach to communication opened doors I never knew existed, she replied. Together, we have given the Coalition something it never had before, the ability to truly understand and include everyone. As they watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, both of them knew that their partnership had become the foundation for a new era of galactic cooperation, where differences in communication were no longer barriers, but bridges to greater understanding.